Welcome to the Entrepreneur Podcast, where we take a look inside the lives of the accomplished and successful businessmen and women. We'll get up close and personal with the founders of booming startups. So lean in and prepare to carry away something to skyrocket your own business. Please subscribe to our show and do leave us a review. It means a lot to us. Now, here's your host, Rajiv.
Hey listeners, welcome to the Entrepreneur Talk Show. I am your host Rajiv Unnikrishnan, and this is the show where we talk about entrepreneurship and speak to great founders, entrepreneurs and investors. Today we have with us Aditya Dev Sood, Chief Mentor at Startup Tunnel. Welcome Aditya.
Hi there.
Startup Tunnel is an early stage incubator that aims to play catalyst to bring powerful ideas to life and take shape, with a focus on providing mentorship to passionate teams working on game-changing ideas to enhance their capabilities in product dev, marketing strategy, rapid prototyping, and design and user experience. Just a brief intro, Aditya is a University of Michigan graduate and a PhD from University of Chicago. He currently is a Chief Mentor of Startup Tunnel, Chairman at the Adianta School for Leadership, and also Chairman at Bihar Innovation Lab. And prior to this was with the Design Public Conclave used in India and Dose of Perception. Again, welcome to the show, Aditya. Do fill in the gaps, if any, in the intro and what's going on in your world today.
Well, thanks a lot, Rajiv. Well, I'd like to share a bit about the kinds of areas that are exciting for us as we move forward.
Okay.
One area of interest for us is what is being called civic technology.
Mm-hmm.
And, so civic technology for us means solutions on platforms that solve problems that people used to think we needed governments to solve.
Okay.
So participatory decision making, distributed means of signaling or suggesting action, or in fact, voting and collectively taking action. The use of blockchain-like technologies to promote transparency and accountability.
Okay.
Absence of falsifiability, mechanisms of keeping track of public assets, even real-time information around traffic transit, location of potholes, the quality of water.
Okay.
All of these are, solutions that we're crying out for solutions like these in environments like India. And traditionally, we expected the social sector to solve these problems for us by working with governments.
Correct.
With civic technology, we could believe, or we have the aspiration, we have the hope that we can encourage startups, technologists of different kinds to promote solutions using new kinds of distributed platforms and media that could, totally change the way we think about how these problems have to be solved.
Okay, great. I mean, that's completely new for Incubate. I've not heard of this before. And before we get into like the product or the platform, any passions outside of work?
You want me to talk about things outside of work? I haven't had my head up out of work for a really long time, other than to spend time with family.
Okay.
So it's like a middle-aged cliche, but I've got a 1.5-year-old and a 4-year-old, and it's all I can do to spend as much time with them as I can, evenings and weekends.
Great. All right. So, I mean, the inevitable question is, what inspired the idea to start off Startup Tunnel?
Well, so I hear that people actually listen to the show, so I don't want to maybe be careful about what I say. Now, I've been investing in startups since about 2007.
Okay.
Close friends had built what turned out to be very successful companies,
Okay.
like Prezi.com, where I was supposed to invest, but never did. So I had a network of, friends, colleagues, people that I saw myself in who saw themselves in me in Europe and the United States, who were doing things in the last decade at a time when nothing like this was really bubbling up in India.
Correct.
And I participated and heard these stories and gave advice wherever I could. Doppler.com is a company that I did invest in, and that was eventually acquired by Nokia. It's
Correct.
a modest success story in an early social media period. But then, it seemed like it would take a while for this stuff to begin taking hold in India. Nobody knew exactly how long. I became involved in the establishment of what eventually became Cobalt, which is a co-working space in Bangalore,
Okay.
which has since established Numa, the French incubator accelerator organization inside of it. But all of this was happening at a period that I was relocating to Delhi, so I had to regretfully sort of end that relationship and began then looking at how to build the startup ecosystem in India. And I had some thoughts on it, which related to the kind of disconnection between technology, business, and design as areas of competence in India.
Okay.
And so that led me to think about maybe if there's a way to run a fellowship program that brings together people that are from one or another of these streams, but then allows them to recombine. So this idea is now about 4 or 5 years old, which eventually became the Adianta Fellowship.
Okay.
So we began attracting these kinds of people. Even as we were running this program, I had collaborators, we had a faculty cloud, a lot of people that were brought together around this. And some of them began saying, hey, look, you're not using all the space that you have. Why don't you start allowing startups to start, working out of this space? And we're like, cool. They said, why don't you call it something, Startup Garage or something like that. I was like, well, we see a long, thin space. Let's call it Startup Tunnel, which is really the space. The URL was available, and then Startup Tunnel happened inside of, the Adianta Fellowship.
Okay.
The second year of running the fellowship, while Startup Tunnel was beginning to be formed, a lot of the students were like, hey, this is really exciting for us, and we want to be involved with this. And when we graduate, we actually want to give pitches as we graduate from the fellowship. We opened up applications for Startup Tunnel for an incubation program, and we got like 10 times the number of applications for Startup Tunnel as we had for the Adianta Fellowship.
Oh, wow, okay.
And that led us to understand that, there's a right place, right time for certain things. Since then, we have completed 2 cohorts. We've worked with 21 startup teams. We have seen 5 of those teams attract seed round funding. I would say that at least 3 of those 5 teams are really winners who will go on to subsequent rounds of funding and are going to become significant and powerful startups over time.
Okay.
And they are in a variety of sectors already. And I've already mentioned one sector that's very dear to my heart, which is civic tech. But then we're also really interested in clean tech, broadly conceived, and also what we're calling networked healthcare. So as we move forward with our cohorts, we're moving from sort of vanilla, we'll accept anything, to kind of more thesis-driven incubation activities.
Okay. So you already started taking in applications for your third cohort, or are these complete?
That's actually in process right now.
Okay.
So I urge you to get this podcast out as soon as you can.
Okay, I'll do that. So what would the vision be for Startup Tunnel?
So as we look forward to the next 5 or 7 years, we would like to work with about 200 companies. We would like to work with 200 startup teams and see somewhere between 40 to 50 of those teams, go on to subsequent round funding.
Oh, great.
We are in the process of speaking to investors and ensuring that we have the appropriate kind of support, not only at the incubation stage, but also at the seed stage, so that we actually participate in more seed rounds than we do now, which is now we don't participate at all.
Okay, got it. And so when you took this project off the ground, I see you have around 4 or 5 co-founders, but were they all there from day one?
So it's an evolving process. An incubation program or even a fund, I would say should really be looked at broadly from the same perspective as a startup itself.
Correct.
That ultimately you can have a loose vision, but you have to be learning very aggressively. You have to be acting on any learnings you have. You have to be building the argument and building momentum and attracting people to you of all kinds, being friends with the world, advisors, mentors, well-wishers, people in media, potential funders, potential channel partners, funds on the far side which will help your startups, channel partners which will help you attract startups. You've got to be really active all around the ecosystem, and that has to be really exciting for you. Otherwise, you'll eventually lose interest and go home.
Correct. So, I mean, you have collaborations with the Adianta School for Leadership, the Bihar Innovation Lab, the Reading Lab, the Civic Innovation Lab, and the Center for Knowledge Society. I mean, these are all parts of the Startup Tunnel, or does this help the incubation at Startup Tunnel?
These are sister organizations.
Okay, okay,
In many cases, you would say that there isn't a direct link.
okay,
Many of these organizations are working in the social sector, so
got it.
we are, close. That is to say, we have a relationship with, let's call it impact investing as a space,
Uh-huh.
and we have an understanding, of what the real needs of this society are, and therefore what the real opportunities are. And I would say because of all this other work, we have a little bit of impatience for kind of Me Too startups and sort of geolocative social media network, or these kinds of kind of ghisa I would say, sort of
Yeah, yeah,
tired,
yeah,
threadbare ideas,
yeah.
which are aggressively tech driven. So we're interested in founders and founding teams that have an eye on what needs to be changed in society, or what challenges a particular sector or domain
Yeah,
has,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that they really use that to inspire their thinking around what kind of tech-based intervention to drive.
Okay. Got it. So your incubation process, I mean, it's a 3 month incubation program, but like from start to finish, I mean, when do you all typically take applications? How many months before, and what typically happens during the incubation?
So I'll just update maybe the information you've had access to online.
Yeah.
Our program runs now 4.5 months,
Oh, okay.
and that is an iteration. That's a change based on the experiences we've had,
Correct, correct.
and the structure of the program has evolved as well from our first cohort. Um, so now what we do is a 5 week boot camp where we meet every Friday
Okay.
and run basically workshops on given topic areas. So that can run from validating a product concept, mapping your customer journey, techniques for getting validation on the kind of value you're hoping to offer different players within the ecosystem,
Okay.
um, thinking about your product stack, looking at your growth hacking strategies, looking at different monetization strategies, what kinds of data analytics are you going to be putting into place. So all of these kinds of topic areas constitute, this 5 week boot camp. At the end of 5 weeks, we ask each of our startups to commit to certain milestones that they're going to achieve over the next 6 weeks.
Okay.
And the next 6 weeks ideally should be like a low contact period. So,
Okay.
of course, call us if you have an emergency, or if you need an immediate reference or some guidance or a connect of some kind. But at this point, it's kind of quiet from our side, and you're on your own. You've got to achieve the milestones that you've committed to. And for different teams at different stages of progress, it could be different.
Yeah.
Like some guys have yet to finish building their product, other guys are trying to launch their product, other guys
Correct.
are trying to increase traction, trying out different growth hacking strategies. Other guys are trying to, read some of the data coming out of their early usage engagement and trying to figure out what that means for different monetization strategies. So wherever you are, you try to go to the next stage, and then we come back and meet 6 weeks later and we
Okay.
review the progress teams have made. And in certain cases, on a competitive basis, we'll make kind of new financial commitments at that time, or we'll make disbursements that were already negotiated.
Okay. Okay.
Now, soon after that, we'll have our pitch clinic. In a way, we're saying we need to teach you how to communicate your intervention better, so that it's more persuasive and that it grabs investor imagination. But we don't need to do that until you've actually figured out some guts of your business model.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, what we see with a shorter incubation program, a lot of this stuff is sitting on top of each other, and teams have barely had a chance to sort of fix some of the core challenges they're facing, and bang, they're already in front of investors. So we deal with that at a fairly late stage, and
Mm-hmm.
then we introduce teams to mentors
Okay.
to practice their pitch, to angel investors, to institutional investors, and then we have a public demo day with media partners. So
Okay.
that's typically how we
A-
how we now run the program.
Okay. And I mean, what's the vetting process like for the guys who apply? I mean, I'm sure you get a lot of applications, but in terms of typically, what would you? I mean, you typically take guys from these sectors you're looking at,
So, what has been working for us is that we put something really interesting out there. Like recently, we said, how can you improve public services using blockchain?
Okay.
And it's an obvious question, but it has not been asked much, especially in the Indian context.
Correct.
And we get people biting and talking back to us on different social media platforms, and that leads to certain round of applications, even though it may not be perfectly related to blockchain, maybe several steps away, but we get then broadly civic tech type applications, which we then filter. So we'll ask a similar question around healthcare. Some sort of provocative challenge will be put up there, often on our Facebook page.
Okay.
And then we filter through the applications that rustles up.
Okay.
So in the current round, for instance, we've got 10 slots. We've had 500 applications. We've had more than 100 live pitches that we have been through.
Wow.
And there's still 4 weeks to go in closing the cohort.
Okay. So in your third cohort, I've also read that one of the sectors is the India Stack and regional language technologies. I mean, I understood the language part. What's the India Stack all about?
Well, I'm sure there are smarter and more sophisticated people than I to talk about India Stack. India Stack, as you surely know, is the entire array of technologies, platforms, formats, protocols that are built upon the foundational layer of the Aadhaar number that was pioneered by the Nilekani.
Okay.
So Aadhaar was always pitched as the foundation, and indeed they intended that there will be a stack on top of it. So by stack they mean things like some of the yojanas that provides. That is to say, some of the programs or services. They mean also things like the universal payments, the UPI system. So these are elements of the so-called India Stack that are soon to come online.
Okay.
And they have the promise of totally changing the way financial transactions are handled on internet and mobile in India. Broadly, you would say that no sector will be untouched one way or another, whether it's health records, for instance, or education certificates. There are elements of India Stack integration for almost any domain. Pretty much every domain that involves a financial transaction will ultimately have to be India Stack compatible.
Okay.
The question is which teams are being more exhibiting more foresight and more creativity in how they integrate and how they use that resource now that it's becoming available in India.
Got it. So, I mean, you have also a few events like Slingshots, Hack Healthathon, and the Product and Investor Meet. So, what is this about? I mean, is it like a regular thing, or it happens in junction with the incubation, or is it for outside the general public?
So, both. These are often community events that align with our calendar in one way or another. So Slingshots has also often been the occasion in which we have graduated startup teams.
Okay.
But in the last Slingshots, for instance, we have done a pretty interesting format where we've invited investors, both angel investors as well as partners in VC firms, to talk about a controversial thesis that they have, which is not shared widely.
Okay.
So a topic area that they believe is going to be big, which is not either common knowledge or obvious consensus.
Okay.
So that is that really captured people's imagination. I mean, it was a really powerful event. The last Slingshots we had people, for instance, talk about tech-enabled SMB lending in India as a very powerful new area. We had somebody, in fact, talk about regional language technology enablement, including interlingual technologies using AI that can predict when you will want a kind of interlingual translation, which preserves Roman text, preserves brand names, for instance.
Okay.
while not naively doing machine translation, but in an intelligent way, preserving the meaning in a way that is acceptable to multilingual users of English as well as multiple other regional languages.
Okay.
So that was a very interesting and provocative kind of thesis statement. So I think that was a way in which we really advanced people's thinking about what are areas of investment opportunity that are meaningful in the Indian context that connects with
Correct.
social trend, technology adoption, the cultural matrix we live in.
Got it. Okay. I mean, you've been in the space, I think, since 2005. I mean, could you briefly describe the startup scene when you started in like 2005, 2007, and fast forward to today? What do you think are the biggest changes in the ecosystem?
Well, I have to say that when I look back, I feel like I was sleepwalking at various stages.
Okay.
That I was like active 2007, 8, period like that, and then I
Okay.
was in a sort of doldrums in the turn of the decade.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it was a period also that you were beginning to see the growth of the early e-commerce players in the Indian market.
Yep.
And to be frank, I never felt any connection or communion with any of these e-commerce players. And to some extent, I also have felt similarly disconnected to the great on-demand revolution that has
Yeah.
unfolded in the last 3 years or so.
Sure.
That encompasses aggregation of transport, food tech, and
Yeah.
you can have massage at home. Somebody will come and make a drink for you at home.
Yeah.
Somebody will make food for you. Like every other kind of on-demand concept has been tried in the last 3 years. And these two broad areas, in a way, always left me cold. So I feel in a way that things happen at the right time. And the kinds of startups that we like to be involved with, I believe, are really often leveraging domain expertise and the scaling power of technology in unique ways. And if I could maybe talk about one or two
Mm-hmm.
of the sort of successful startups that we've had that are trying to do this, one is a company called 8 Minute Solar that began life in a way as a conventional solar company,
Mm-hmm.
but then began thinking about how to convert their work into a marketplace model. Um, we helped them with that over the course of the last year, and now they're seeing some significant growth numbers as a result of their ability to integrate a third party financing, somebody's rooftop, another person's ability to install um, solar equipment on that rooftop, and their ability to tie the whole thing together with an energy contract and basically rolling this out at scale all over India at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, that is a kind of a solution that excites us. There's another company called TrueLancer that has 250,000 service providers from all across Asia
Mm-hmm.
sitting on its platform. Providers from the Philippines, Indonesia, India, Egypt, even Nigeria, Kenya, places like that. And these guys are serving their own markets as well as serving markets in Europe and the United States.
Okay.
And so these guys, TrueLancer, have protocols in place that allow these service providers to improve their bid, to learn about why their bid wasn't accepted, to improve even the quality of their business English, because many of these providers have
That's
English as
great.
a second and third language.
Correct.
So it's a sort of upskilling as well as providing a digital service income to a large number of people around the world. So these are, not the traditional on-demand and e-commerce types of play. And so I would say that in the India region, so long as you're looking at serious businesses that require a degree of real understanding of how a particular sector works, you won't be creating, vapor or you won't be creating
Correct.
bubbles.
Correct. So, I mean, what would you define as a success as an incubator? I mean, for you.
Well, it's pretty obvious that success has to do with track record.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think we're off to a good start there.
Okay.
Um, I think the next stage for us is really to tie up channel partners on the far side. That is to say, we say we're going to work in network health over the next year.
Yep.
Who else is out there in terms of funds who are also interested in networked healthcare? And can we get them on board now so that we align our search criteria and our sub-theses closely with what some of those funds are thinking about?
Right.
So next year we have plans to do 2 or 3 sector-specific cohorts. So
Okay.
we'll do one likely in Bangalore around network health, and one likely in Delhi around clean tech. And for that, we're going to be tying up a lot of the partners that would be interested in the output of our incubation program. That is to say, companies that already have proof of concept, traction, monetization that represent things that a seed fund can actually invest in.
Okay. What do you think is the typical criteria that you, as an incubator or investor, is looking for in a startup?
Well, that's a tough one. First and foremost, I would like to see awareness, a sense of urgency about exactly what it means to build a startup. That is to say, you are looking at very long odds. The odds of you moving through the early stage into a seed stage is anywhere between 1 in 100 to 1 in 50 to 1 in 10, depending on which room you happen to be sitting in.
That's correct.
And so, if teams don't have, aren't appropriately humbled and energized by the enormity of those odds, then we feel they don't know what they're doing, and they don't have an appropriate appreciation for what we are doing to try to improve those odds.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I wouldn't use some of the cutoffs that I think we hear in the industry a lot, that there should be a tech co-founder.
Correct.
Things like that, because we have seen, fairly senior entrepreneurs, like people who are in their late 30s, or even older than that, who don't have a tech background, but who have, as I've said, domain-specific understanding of something happening in health or something happening in the creative agency business, where they see an opportunity to intervene and build a proposition or build a platform. And so I think other people can come on board over time if you have really the right charisma and vision on the part of the founding team or even a founding individual. And we have invested in individuals, single-person founders who have then built teams around them and built advisory networks around them.
Okay.
So the ability to look at the entire universe and feel that they're all there for you and they're all available to help you. The appropriate understanding that what you're trying to do, you really don't have the ability to do today. Not only in terms of money, but even in terms of knowledge, technology, depth of understanding. There's so much for you to learn ahead on this journey. And that it's a learning path that you can only traverse with other people. When we see people that are, both ambitious and humble at the same time, we feel that they're going to be able to succeed in that.
Okay. So, interesting point. So, my next question was a single founder or a team?
I think I'm with Dave McClure in a way to say, you can't know. You don't know. And time and again, in the last 2 cohorts, we've seen that our assumptions about who are our best startups coming into the program turned out to be totally wrong as we concluded the program. There are teams that we were very worried about who became our stars, and vice versa. So I think there are elements of how the VC universe works, which are being upgraded and updated all the time as a result of the success of incubation programs, because it isn't really about a good bet by a venture partner or an analyst that comes good. It's about distributing risk and about giving enough opportunity that the best team that you've been able to assemble, the best cohort that you've been able to assemble, tries together to go to the next level.
Okay.
And some will fail for reasons that have nothing to do with their limitations or ours. It turns out to be that really the challenge they took on is not soluble today, but it may be soluble 7 years from today by a different team.
Correct. So, I mean, like, there are so many incubators now in India, and of course, small angels. I mean, who would you recommend, or rather, what typical criteria should a founder look for in them?
Uh, what criteria should a founder look for in terms of choosing an
Correct,
acceleration?
correct, correct.
So, even as there are many more programs, there are many more applicants.
Yeah, that's true.
So, if anybody takes you, you should go. That's one signal that I'll offer. Because over the last 3 years alone, you may recall that 3 years ago, NASCOM had in mind to build 10,000 startups. So,
Yes,
that
correct.
has long time been achieved, and we're going into I don't know how many, tens of thousands of startups we have, but lots. Failed ones, successful ones, people that are in a second life, and so forth. Um, so the I'm answering now another question, but like, is this startup ecosystem a bubble? The fact is that when you cease to have dynamic teams proposing new ways to do things,
Correct.
that's when you'll discover that all of us, the ecosystem players, start falling flat.
That's
So
true.
long as there's a positive pressure from lots of teams coming up with great new ideas, our job will be to service and filter and funnel those ideas.
That's true. Very true, actually. That was one of my questions, but I didn't ask it. So, what would you say are the most common mistakes that new founders get into? I mean, from the two cohorts you've seen or your experience.
Well, it's a mistake that I would say that we also participate in. It's not unique to the
Of
founding
course, of
piece.
course.
But there are many cases in which uh, teams have been seduced by the linguistic expression of an idea, which is often analogically represented, or in other ways is a very loose articulation, such as search is broken or e-commerce is broken in India. Um, such expressions of sentiment um, sound good and they arrest further inquiry,
Hmm.
but they actually hide the fact that you don't have a good answer as to what exactly value proposition you're going to render to your end user. So, one of the exercises that we do is this diagram of customer journey. We
Okay.
say, how will somebody discover you? What will they do on your platform? Diagram all of this, and then after they achieve satisfaction, what is the mechanism through which they might refer or encourage another user like themselves to engage your
Correct.
platform? And I have literally had cases where, having gone through this exercise, teams have got blank sheets, or soon after that, they end up totally caving in and breaking down
Oh, okay.
because they had in mind that they were going to build something
Yeah, yeah.
next practo, for instance, in healthcare,
Correct.
and the fact that there was no reasonable way for them to do it became evident to them when they undertook this kind of a diagramming. Now, diagramming is just one technique of bringing greater fidelity to your own concept of your business plan. There are many other ways to do it, including actually building the product itself.
Correct,
And
correct.
at various stages, you can turn out to have your assumptions fail you. And now, being too confident in your assumptions and not having the again humility and detail orientation to continuously validate your assumptions is exactly the mistake that will cause you to fumble and then be looking for you know kind of pivot that is undertaken in
Yeah.
crisis, is very desperate. So I think the advice I'm offering is really just be extremely careful and continuously validate every single assumption and be as articulate in in diagram or in 3 dimensions or in actual proof of concept, working prototype about what it is you're building and why people want are going to love to use it.
Okay. Got it. So moving out of business, who would you say influenced you most in life?
Um, Gosh, I should be ready for this, shouldn't I? But, honestly, I would say that I'm not ready for this question. Um, I have led a colorful life so far, and I've been an academic for a long time, and I've worked in design, user experience, and product development for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And in each of these periods of life, I've had different kinds of
Different.
heroes.
Correct.
Uh, Anthropologists, ethnographers, certain designers, some organizations. I would credit a lot of the work that I did with Nokia in the last decade for helping me understand how important it is to listen to users.
Correct.
Um, Most recently, I think there are a couple of books that almost every startup enthusiast has read, including The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz and Zero to One by Peter Thiel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whatever you think of Peter Thiel's politics or Ben Horowitz's abilities as a CEO, these are profound books, and in many ways, I think they trigger useful conversations um, that everybody in the startup ecosystem should be having.
Correct. So, I mean, what is some of the best advice you've been given over time?
Don't do it. I mean, and I guess I'll use the opportunity to share a bit of how I feel investors or ecosystem players who are in my space,
Yeah.
place who are in the job of saying yes or no, who are
Yeah.
basically, you would say, dwarpals or gatekeepers in some sense.
Correct.
I think you have to be kind, um, but I don't think it's helpful to sugarcoat the truth.
That's true.
Um,
That's true.
I think that is a waste of other people's time. So if somebody has gone through the effort of coming to your campus and given a sort of startup pitch,
Yeah. Yeah.
they deserve your honest feedback. And if you think there isn't a business there,
Tell them.
you
Correct.
think that there's information that they believe to be true, which is wrong, you have to tell them. And I think just this morning we had, pitches, and I had to tell several people that I don't see a business here,
Okay.
or that they need to look at the competition far more rigorously and answer key questions about how they're going to achieve, in a way, what their competition has already achieved 5 or 7 years ago. Um, so I don't know about good advice that's been given to me. I'm often in the habit of giving advice,
Okay.
and what I think I try to do is, in dialogue with founding teams, try to understand the ambition and the product vision, and try to work with them to try to help conceptualize who are the kinds of people or kinds of institutions or kinds of sectors that would be interested in this, whom they should be talking to, where some monetization opportunities might be hiding that remain to be validated. So really, it's a way of putting yourself in the shoes of the founding team. I wouldn't say as a virtual co-founder, because that's not true either.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're an advisor, and I would be strongly critical of models wherein the boundary lines between the executive team and the advisors get blurred, because of
That's
course
true.
we see a lot of that as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Definitely.
You're an advisor, and your teams, whether they have signed on with you or whether you expect them to sign on with you later, or whether you will never see each other again, they you have a responsibility to give them the best advice and the best knowledge and the best links and the best suggestions or connections that you possibly can.
Okay. And finally, any last thought or piece of advice that you may miss that you want to give our aspiring founders or startups?
Well, I would like to think through this question of geography in terms of how important is it to be in a startup um, hub of some kind. And I don't want to give advice. I want to just think through the process, think through the question with you.
Yep.
It used to be that if you wanted to build a certain kind of company, you had to be in Silicon Valley. And I've seen, friends move from Hungary to Silicon Valley to build a successful company
Correct.
because they felt they had to do that. Over time, you've seen these clusters emerge in India. And so Delhi and Bangalore, the two geographies where we're active, together represent 50% of all the startup activity that's happening.
That's true. Yeah.
So it would appear that if you are not in one of these two geographies and you're not, say, in a place like Bombay, you're at something of a disadvantage. That isn't to say that there aren't interesting success stories coming out of places like Jaipur and Chennai. There are, and Chandigarh. But I think that in all of these cases, there are also institutional connections that are being forged with kind of growing ecosystems now in Delhi and Bangalore.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you don't build those relationships, I fear that the milieu that you're in and the information that you're gaining access to could be just a few months out of date, 6 or 12 or 18 months out of date. And then, just building on this question of geography, I'll share a quote by Sharad Sharma, who said, successful startups tend to integrate Bangalore tech muscle with Delhi marketing hustle. So, so that's in a way also what every successful startup has to achieve.
Okay. And please let our listeners know how they can reach you and also Startup Tunnel.
So we are on Twitter at STTNL.
Okay.
And then online www.startuptunnel.com.
All right, great. Again, Aditya, thanks for taking the time to talk to us and inspiring our listeners to hopefully start their own ventures, and all the very best with Startup Tunnel.
Thanks so much, Rajiv.
So do visit startuptunnel.com and visit us at theasianentrepreneur.com to get the show notes, and also subscribe to the show on all the platforms, and do leave a review on your thoughts about the show. Thank you.
Thank you for listening, and please subscribe to the show so you don't miss an episode. In the meantime, head over to theasianentrepreneur.com and check out show notes and other information to motivate you in your entrepreneurial endeavors.